Hello, everyone. My name is Karl Lentini. I'm an independent filmmaker based in Austin, Texas, and I'm directed a movie called Men of Law. You see the poster right here, and it's in post-production now and will come out later this year. And it deals with the subject of human trafficking. It's fiction, but it's based on a very real topic. So to help us learn a little bit more about the real topic of trafficking, we have a gentleman here today with quite an extraordinary background, and I'm really honored to have him. He served with special forces. He's a former DIA intelligence collector and ex-DEA special agent, major in the United States Army, Jeffrey Prather. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Hey, thanks for having me. You got all that right, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm fascinated to know about your interactions with child rescue.
Well, I've only done a couple, and those were upon request into Mexico. But I learned how to do that when I was serving in 7th Special Forces back in the 80s, because I got to go to Special Operations Technique School, which was the blue light school, and blue light was the forerunner to Delta. So that was hostage rescue shooting. That's where you just shoot until you get calluses, where you actually sit in the room and eventually they put targets behind your head and you shoot over people's shoulders. It's only the military, shoots that way. But a lot of my instructors were blue light and Delta, and some of them were already getting out, and they were doing child rescue. And how they did it was very low profile. It was a mom that had naively married a Muslim guy from the Mideast, and then when they went back there, all of a sudden she couldn't drive, she couldn't do anything, and then she tries to get out, and they keep the kid. And so what the Delta operators would do then was they'd plan it out. They do everything legally, but they would stop the school bus, just by feigning a car problem or something. They'd come on the school bus, no guns. They'd bring the mom with them. They'd throw money at the driver. They'd throw the keys into the desert. The child would go to the mother because they didn't want to be accused of terrorism, because, of course, they were counter-terrorists. And then they would reunite the child with the mother, and then they would expedite them getting out of the country. And I learned that back in the 80s, and I actually got to do that with the help of some of my employees. I have a company called Warrior School. It's still up, warriorschool.com. It was a tactical training company, still is, but we used to have a lot of government contracts for all the branches, all the intelligence agencies. From 2004 to 2014, lots of classes, tens of thousands of folks. But anyway, I had a lot of veterans working for me, and so I was able to pull on those guys. So, for example, I sent a native Spanish speaker veteran into Mexico with the family to retrieve a little girl. Very low profile, no guns, no drama, and nobody's aware of it. And so that's my direct experience with child rescue. My indirect experience as a DEA special agent for 19 years is, of course, that the drug cartels are now running human beings, and I saw a lot of that. And I can speak to that, I guess, in more detail if you'd like.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Well, so I left active duty in 1990 because I'd run across the DEA at Fort Sherman, Panama, which is overgrown. We're just starting to get that back. But there was another captain. I was a captain at the time, another Special Forces captain training a team of long hairs. I thought it was CIA. Turned out to be DEA Snowcap. And Operation Snowcap was really the first international law enforcement where special agents of the Drug Enforcement Administration got trained up by SF, and then they went to Central and South American host nations to work with counter police and counter military on counter-drug operations. So I was a Spanish-speaking military intelligence, special forces, special operations shooter. So they were pretty happy to get me. And in 1990, I graduated from the DEA basic agent course at the FBI Academy and ended up on the Nogales border for 10 years because I spoke Spanish. So that was real tough. But I worked so many cases and huge dope cases, seizing 100 kilos of cocaine often. I mean, my first big pop was 4,000 pounds of marijuana. That led to multiple 100 kilos of cocaine, eventually 10,000 pounds of marijuana, eventually 2,000 pounds of cocaine in different cases. But the drug problem is nothing new in America, and America and Europe are awash in drugs. And 1/4 to 1/3 of the population is on some kind of drug. If you think about even women on birth control or just something, we are a very drugged up population. So the cartels found that with the America and Europe awash in drugs, they could then move into child trafficking, sex slavery, all of that, because you can the product moves itself, and the product can be resold. And if you're going after children, then you can resell them for much of their lifetime. You can have multiple uses for them. Child porn. I mean, the best thing that happens to these kids is that they're working in a field for 14 hours a day. So, I saw that not like it was under Biden, under Pedo Joe, as I call him, because he was always fondling and biting kids. But I certainly saw quite a bit of that. But the important thing to understand is that the plazas, the corridors that the federales, the feos, the federal comandantes run. In my day, they paid $1 million to get that corridor, and they brought their guys in. And then they got a mordida, it's called a little bite, of everybody that came across. Now the cartels run those corridors completely, and everybody that comes across those corridors, whether it's mules, campesinos coming to work, whether it's little kids, whatever, they are under cartel control. And the cartel is running that. And that's a huge professional, multi-billion-dollar international operation with professional soldiers, with professional intelligence in all the major cities as well. And that's what we're up against. And that's what President Trump actually finally started to fight when he declared the cartels as FTOs, as foreign terrorist organizations, because then that brought the military in. That's kind of how I got started, because the war on drugs was back in the 90s. So when I left active duty, I was recruited into the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so I was simultaneously a Drug Enforcement Administration credentialed special agent with also a Defense Intelligence Agency intelligence officer credentials. So I saw, I had a DOD top secret, I had a DOJ top secret. I could do stuff both ways legally, and had a lot of experience with that. So, what we're seeing now is nothing new. It's the only new thing is under Biden, the government was totally in on it. The government was pimping kids, and so was ICE and Border Patrol and DEA and everybody else.
So, as what I figure is, when you have an organization like a drug cartel that has billions of dollars, they will pay to make their business move and move their product. And it's not something that I can't point to you evidence or maybe a court case, but I know that there's got to be some bribery going on there.
Oh, sure. I mean, that happens all the time. Officials are bought off all the time. On the border, all you got to do is go to a customs inspector and say, next Wednesday at 3 p.m., just don't check anybody from 3:30 to 4 o'clock, and you'll get $4,000. You don't have to do anything. It's just not doing something.
Mm.
And by the way, here's a photograph of your kids at the school. That's another thing people don't realize is that if you're running cocaine, at least in my day, when you were going to run it, they said, okay, give me your address, give me a photograph of your kids. And that's why Phoenix is the second largest kidnapping capital of the world next to Mexico City. It's all dopers kidnapping dopers and holding them hostage until the cocaine is delivered. But how I became a whistleblower and got fired, 1 year from retirement without ever being charged or convicted, without ever having a bad evaluation, even, is because I uncovered that the DEA had a deal with the Sinaloa cartel to run drugs north in exchange for the Fast and Furious guns going south. And although I was slandered and libeled and trolled, eventually it came out, and you can look this up right now if you want, is in the Niebla Zambada trial, who was a Sinaloa cartel leader who got arrested and was going to be prosecuted. He said, well, wait a minute, you can't prosecute me. I had a deal with the DEA. And sure enough, in federal court, the record shows in the Niebla Zambada trial, the DEA agents did raise their hand and swear under oath that they did have a deal with the Sinaloa cartel to run drugs north in exchange for the Fast and Furious guns going south. Fast and Furious guns that killed Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, for example, and hundreds and thousands of Mexicans, and that was our government. That's when I got thrown off of Fox News and Laura Ingraham, and when I was exposing that, because they did not want to hear that.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that. That's remarkable that you're talking about a real case that has been proven, that's been validated, and I believe there are other whistleblowers who came forward, and then they say, they pull away the welcome mat to you on the media.
Oh, sure. I'm a little whistleblower. John Dotson, Vince Cefalu, ATF, big heroes, big brass, volleyballs, and they really stood up much more so than I. I was fired once. Vince was fired like 3 times. John wasn't fired at all. That's kind of strange. He was on Glenn Beck recently, and he got his book out, but he never connected it to the bosses. And it was clearly the bosses, and he just said, well, I don't know. Well, to run guns into a foreign country is a covert operation. And I have a lot of experience with covert operations in the military and law enforcement and intelligence. In federal law enforcement, it's called a SARC, a Special Activity Review Committee, reviews that. And so if they were going to run guns into Mexico, as we did, then that would have gone to the State Department, that would have gone to the DOD. Everybody would have seen that. And the fiction, the script that still exists today is a couple of ATF supervisors in DEA, because it was actually in the DEA office in Phoenix, just got together one morning and said, hey, Fred, you busy today? No, Tom, I'm not busy. Hey, you want to do an international gun running operation into Mexico where we're not tracking guns? Hey, yeah, sounds good to me. I got nothing else going. Let's do that. Yeah, that's not how that stuff's done. That stuff, it goes up, was vetted, was cleared, all by the higher ups. And that's why I guess John got his book, because he said, well, I don't know how it happened. It's real obvious how it happened. It was the government doing gun running because there was no chain of custody. There was no way to track the guns. The government is in on it. The government's the biggest gun runner. And we've seen plenty of operations where the FBI and the CIA has run drugs. In fact, I saw that back in my special forces days, working with the Contras when Ali North did the Iran-Contra debacle. And, I'm one of the few who didn't think Ali North was a hero. I thought he was an idiot. because he built the Clinton cartel of death. Because when it became illegal to support the Contras, he did this covert operation. And, in special forces, we know how to do covert operations, but what's a Marine colonel, White House staff guy know about covert operations? Nothing. And so he ended up, running guns to the Contras while they were running cocaine into the country. And of course, the CIA took a lot of that black money, that off the books money, and they're still doing it to this day.
Wow. I mean, it's pretty shocking to hear that, because I've heard about that for years, but to hear you talk about it, that's pretty damning. And I mean, so many people are calling for arrests. We want justice. We want something to happen. So we eagerly hope there's some justice in this world.
Well, they're starting to get some of the federal corrupt judges. Holman of ICE is doing a pretty good job of that. One of the big problems Trump faces is corrupt lawfare federal judges that are in thrall to special interest groups that have met with them before. And they're starting to roll some of those up because they're able to do some investigations. I can't think of the judge's name right now, but he was just found out that there was a whistleblower like me that came forward from the court and said he heard the judge meeting with these groups and saying, well, if you come into my courtroom, I'll give you favorable behavior. And that judge got arrested. And we're seeing that start to happen. So the Department of Justice is very corrupt. It's been infiltrated. I say our republic has fallen because we can defeat any foreign adversary. But through corruption via espionage, we've been infiltrated. And through sabotage, we've been interdicted. And one of the ways we're sabotaged is through lawfare, where the courts, just like the way the courts went after Trump and the way the courts have supported FISA lies over and over from FBI, even though they keep lying, and Kleinsmith changing reports. If I had changed reports like that in my day, I'd be in federal prison for 30 years. So there's a lot of corruption. They're starting to get at it. It's pretty slow. I have not been happy at all with Bondi or Patel's efforts. I don't think they understand the depth of the corruption in there. But they're making some progress. RFK is making good progress. Holman's making good progress.
With regards to trafficking, I know that it's not just a matter of people trafficked over the border. I know within the United States, there's a lot of trafficking operations, runaways from families of all ethnicities, all types of people forced into the sex trade. But do you see a drop in cross-border traffic happening?
Yeah, there is definitely a drop in that. So the deep state, or the double government, which is the intelligence community that is behind the outward government, runs what I call the dark economy. The dark economy is made up of weapons, drugs, and people. And the dark economy operates because the intelligence community operates via diplomatic immunity, via diplomatic pouch. So, you and I, we got to make work for a living. They can run drugs. They can run people. They can run arms because they have diplomatic immunity. And so Fast and Furious was an international gun running operation. Benghazi was an international gun running operation. Syria was an international gun running operation. Afghanistan turned into an international gun running operation where we left so much material, because any military guy knows you destroy the stuff so the enemy doesn't get it. That's standard procedure. Everybody knows that. And now Ukraine is an international gun running operation. But along with running guns, running arms, there are also the same channels are running drugs and people simultaneously. All of those are happening simultaneously. So where you see Trump putting a second military zone on the border, I think that's really smart. He just made this area between Texas and New Mexico a military installation. So that means if you're coming onto a military installation, of course, you can't just walk onto military installations. You can walk on a lot easier onto farms, ranches, onto parks, but walking onto a military installation is a whole nother level. It's federal charges. And so they've made a second military zone, which is exactly where they should be on the border, because that's what the military is really supposed to be: is protect the country, protect the nation's borders. It's the military used internally that's the problem, not externally. It was never externally. It was because we didn't want to be like the British, where the British came in and said, "Nice house, I'll take it." Um, so yeah, there's a big drop in that, and they're recovering some kids. It's just a great tragedy, that there were 320,000 plus, that were pimped, under the Biden administration, and by my peers, by ICE, by Border Patrol, by DEA, um, you know, and all those guys that went along with that should be uh, held to account as well. Not just okay, now we'll actually do our jobs. But um, but yeah, I do see a drop. Things are getting better, but that is a massive economy that is out of control and largely unseen. Um, and it works on this dark economy international network, but also by Trump getting control, more influence on the Panama Canal, and getting more influence in Venezuela, both of places which I've worked extensively. Uh, those are inflection points, and those are really important to get control of that. So what he's really trying to do, and I don't think a lot of people understand this, is there's the dark economy. So under Pedo Joe, under Biden, the economy was in the toilet, right? Economy wasn't working because he didn't care about the economy. He cared about the dark economy. So now with Trump deterring and dismantling the dark economy, the regular economy can come back, and middle America and small business can come back. And that's what we see happening with Mexico, where and Trump did he did this the first time when he was in before with the president of Mexico. Now with Scheinbaum, is he basically said, hey, you can have legitimate economy business with us, which is multi-billion, produce, all that comes across the border, or you can go with the traffickers. And the traffickers, it's a lot of money, but then you gotta lose a lot of it because you got to pay off everybody. And both times the president of Mexico has said, yeah, we'll go with you. They've put troops on the Guatemalan border. And so, yeah, there's a lot of improvement happening in that regard.
Now, you mentioned the 320,000 missing children. Since they came over the border and are hopefully within our system, I hope that they are trackable, that we know their names, that there's paperwork on them. No?
No, not at all. They were pimped. They were. So the first fiction is, so I've worked Chile, Bolivia, Venezuela, Brazil, and then Panama, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico. So I've worked all of Latin America in special operations, military, in intelligence, and in federal law enforcement. In the 80s, it was special forces and psychological operations. In the 90s, it was snowcap special operations and DIA. So I'm very familiar, and I've worked at every level, from high levels of government to going into dirt shacks and being fed, beans and goat cheese by the nice people that we were helping. But The fiction is that these campesinos, these illiterate little peasants, uh, give their kids to strangers to give them to some relative in a city in America. And anybody who has any sense or thinks about it realizes that. I remember driving into lots of towns where we'd stop and ask somebody, where's the post office or where's the next town? And they just look at you because they'd never mailed a letter or they'd never even been to the next town. So the idea that some little kid is somehow going to get dropped off with some relative in a first world country going from a third world country, it's just a total fiction, and it's a very shallow lie, and it's insulting that we're supposed to believe it. But it's a pretty dumbed down, drugged up population, I guess. So who's bringing those kids up? They're cartel members, and what are they doing to them on the way up? They're doing terrible things to them all the way up. But that's also grooming them on the way up as they are raping them. That is grooming them. And now I've seen the rape fields. I've seen the panties and bras hanging from the trees on the border. I've talked to the ranchers who have heard the screams at night. And so, by the time they get up across the border, they are very broken and they're prepared for their roles as prostitutes, as porn film. And actually then they can be used as they grow up to seduce others and move up in the organization. So none of those 320,000, to my knowledge, are tracked at all. It's the same thing with the way they ran the guns. They did not track. There was no tracking device in the guns. There was no tracking of the serial numbers, because if I had sold you dope, if I did an undercover deal and I sold you 1 kilo, and then next time we met, I sold you 3 kilos, and then next time I sold you 9 kilos. If I took you into court and arrested you, you get some high-speed doper attorney. You say, well, Special Agent Prather, did you sell my client dope? Yeah, I sold him 1 kilo, 3 kilos, and 9 kilos on these occasions. Oh yeah, and was it real cocaine? Yeah, it was real cocaine. And then what'd he do with it? Well, I don't know what he did with it. He probably sold it to women and children and brought them into chemical slavery. Well, then Special Agent Prather, please explain to me what is the difference between my client as a drug trafficker and you as a drug trafficker? And I'd be going, So every time I sold you 1, 3, and 9, I would have to then have DPS or the sheriff's office or somebody pull you over and say, hey, you were weaving, you got a taillight out. You got to watch yourself. You were speeding. And by the way, my canine's in the car, and he's been sitting there all day. You don't have any drugs or guns on you, do you? And of course you say, well, no, of course I don't. Well, you don't mind if I just run my canine for exercise? Okay, sure. And so then the canine hits, I get the 1, 3, and 9 kilos. You don't know it's me until I take you to court. But the important thing is when I go to trial and your doper bar goes, well, what's the difference? Like, well, I took that dope off. It's in the drug evidence. And I sent the samples to San Diego and it came back 98% positive. So I'm not a drug dealer. I'm a drug law enforcement special agent, and he's a drug dealer, and I'm going to put him in prison for 30 years. That's how it's done properly. And I did it many times. But with the Fast and Furious guns, there was no tracking of them. They even excluded the AK-47s that killed Brian Terry from the trial. This is the last time I was on Fox News. Like, why would you exclude the murder weapon unless you're trying to cover something up? And the government excluded the AK-47s. Well, it's the same thing with the kids. These Border Patrol guys would deliver these kids to the same address week after week. How many kids can go to a foster home? Unless it's a ranch or something or an institution, they're pimping them. And they knew that. It's very clear that they knew that, and they went along with it. And these facilities that we had south of Tucson with the with the fences up, and you couldn't go in, and the police and the sheriffs were guarding them. They're all in on it. They all went along with it, and then putting them in hotel rooms. That's the worst, because if you're in a big open enclosure where you can see, you can still have bad things happen, but it's harder. You put them in hotel rooms, as they did in San Diego and New York. It's just a brothel. It's just a child brothel, and it's the government doing it.
Yeah, I read about those hotels in New York City, where it's just a hotbed of crime and prostitution and drug dealing and all manner of corruption going on that was paid for by the U.S. taxpayer, right?
Yep. And then when they seduce them, first then you get the Johns, you seduce them, drug them up, then you film them. That's Epstein Island. That's Biden's son. That's the way the intelligence agencies do it. And really, that's the reason I think this happened, is because no one has gone to jail for Epstein. No one on that list has ever gone to jail. But there was the flight list. The whole list hasn't come out, but most of the list has come out. But the problem was the flight logs. So under Biden, they didn't need flight logs. They just brought them in so that America became Epstein Island.
America, all of America, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got one question on the Fast and Furious. Help me understand that the guns weren't tracked. There weren't tracing devices on them. But when guns were used in crimes, how did they link them to the Fast and Furious operation?
Well, they had recorded the serial numbers of the ones they were running. But ask me how many guns that were recovered were used in prosecution cases.
Zero.
Wow. Zero. So then ATF is not an intelligence agency. It's a law enforcement agency. So if you're going to again, that's why I showed you the analogy of me selling you cocaine. Although ATF assures me, I was the liaison to Tucson ATF, by the way, as well. And so I worked with them. They don't do reverses like that. What I just described to you was a reverse, where I'm undercover selling you dope. But they don't do that. But if they did, they would have to recover those guns. There was no effort made to recover them. And then there was no effort made to ever make one case when they went after I'm getting senile and old. Huge trafficker. They found a 50 caliber weapon. There was a Fast and Furious gun in his home, and it was never used in any charges. And the reason is because once you admit that as evidence, then you got to talk about chain of custody and where that came from and who did what. And the answer is the government did it.
That would make a great movie. I'm just saying. That whole story of Fast and Furious, not the car movie, but the whole gun running.
I hate it when people tell young people, like, you mean the car movie? I'm like, ugh. Yeah.
And then you had said that the cartels at one time would pay $1 million to control a certain corridor of the border or near the border, but now they control them outright.
Yes. Well, no, I said a federale comandante, the Mexican federal police, would pay the cartel $1 million in advance to control that plaza. And I worked with the federales. I used to go I've done a lot of dangerous stuff. The most dangerous stuff I ever did was doing cross-border operations in Mexico.
Mm.
And I stuck into Nicaragua back in the day, back in the 80s. But that was less dangerous than going into Mexico, because you got to watch out for the federales, you got to watch out for the dopers, you got to watch out for the judiciales. Um, but yeah, the Mexican government has long been in thrall to La Familia cartel. The DEA was in thrall to the Sinaloa cartel. And now, after the Biden debacle, all the cartels are very much entrenched in all the major cities and in a lot of police departments uh, and sheriff's offices, and they don't want to give that up. So I've said Trump has got several wars going on. Once he declared the cartels FTOs, that's one war. And that would become a much bloodier war, although it won't be billed as a war. It'll be billed as gang violence or something. And we've seen more of that. We've seen feds going after some Tren de Aragua, which is good as well. But Tren de Aragua is very high profile, kind of like the Zetas, the cutting off heads and tearing people apart. It's the much more low profile La Familia cartel or Sinaloa cartel that are embedded, that have garages, that have stash houses, that have American middle-aged white folk, driving their dope for them, like in Clint Eastwood, The Mule. All of that is, and the resources are almost boundless. The resources of the cartels are bigger than some countries. They're certainly bigger than individual agencies such as the DEA. When I was the case that got me in trouble was I had an informant who I was going to extradite, Miguel Caro Quintero, brother of Rafael, who tortured and murdered our agent, Kiki Camarena. And the lifetime cap to pay a DEA informant in my day was $250,000. And I paid my informant with, of course, government permission, special permission from the DEA and DOJ. I'd pay that in one payment, and I'd paid in multiple payments. But the point is, if you're really going to have a high level informant like I did, then you got to have the money to work that with them, because the money is staggering. And so they have ex professional military, they have ex professional intelligence, ex professional special operations. There's some former American Marine running one of the cartels, I believe.
Wow. When I got a dumb question. When someone is bribed with cartel money, is that money already laundered? So that if it's caught in someone's refrigerator, this bag of cash, is it already been laundered?
Well, that depends. So, the dope comes up, the money changes hands, the money's got to go back to the boss. Does the money need to go out of the country south? Because what you got is drugs going north, money going south. And there aren't many stops going south, by the way. They used to put it in powdered soap, clothes soap boxes. But the problem is there's so much physical money that it's just very difficult to hide. So they ended up hiding in the walls. I'm sure you've seen the movies of this, and
Yeah.
they have to spend so much of it to bribe everybody that what they get is not that much, but they're making so much, it's still a lot. So is it laundered? That depends on whether it's coming back then from Mexico, from Colombia or whatever, or it's still in the States and just turn around and paid off. So that really kind of depends. But typically in Arizona, what they were doing was buying properties and then giving legislatures in Arizona legislature these discount properties, which probably have cash in the walls of them too. And so that's the laundering process. Is they're not paying them outright, but they're getting these super great deals on properties, and therefore they control the legislature. That's why Arizona is still fallen. The Arizona government is still very corrupt because they need those transshipment points. Phoenix, Tucson, Nogales are very crucial for those transshipment points. So they really want law enforcement weakened and bought off, in those corridors.
So bribery is not just necessarily handing off cash. It can be a cheap house that has a lot of land, and there are legal ways of bribing people or coercing them.
That's mostly what happened with the Arizona officials. If you follow in Arizona elections, they wanted Lake to get in there, and of course all the voting machines were false, and there was a big effort, and I was helping with that effort to get legitimate voting in, but the politicians in charge didn't let that happen, and that's because they are very much in thrall to the cartels, and the reason they're in thrall is because Mexico, if you look at Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, it's twin cities. That's where I worked for 10 years. That's a crucial transshipment point. That's where all the dope comes right through. That and Eagle Pass in Texas and over in San Diego. Those are crucial transshipment points. So the cartels need to control the next place up, which is Tucson. Next place up from that is Phoenix. And then from Phoenix, you can go west to Los Angeles, or you can go east to Chicago, Detroit, New York. But they have to control those transshipment points.
On another kind of a different angle, all that we're talking about is because people here buy this stuff. They buy drugs, children, prostitution. So it's a whole nother question to ask. Why do we do this? Why does this happen? And then that's a whole nother topic.
Well, for that, I would put on my author hat and my chaplain hat. And, my book is Boys Are Born, Men Are Trained, my journey with an Apache medicine man. And our youth are no longer fathered well. And all the studies show that if the dad died or divorced or something, they can make it. But if the dad was never there, if children were never claimed by their father, then they're going to spiral into gangs. They're going to spiral, drop out of school, get into drugs. And we have a nation of fatherlessness now and a lack of marriage. And marriage is so important because when I give my name to my children, I'm saying I claim them, I protect them, they have my name, I'm going to fight for them. And that is gone from this country along with our morals. And so we have these grown males that are very, very immature, emotionally immature. You're physically mature when you can reproduce, you're emotionally mature when you can love well. And they do not love well. They are selfish, they're self-centered, they don't know how to sacrifice. And that's because their fathers have failed them. And the reason really for all that is our national ethics have eroded. And our national ethics are based upon our morals. And our morals, I believe, are based upon Mosaic 10 Commandments, Mosaic and Christic 2 Commandments. Love God with your whole heart, mind, and power, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And Atachana's commandments is never harm children, and everything is born of woman. If you put those three things together, I think you get American exceptionalism. And American exceptionalism is we'll fight, kill, and die for freedom, and then we'll give the country back, and no one else has ever done that. That's what makes us exceptional. But that ethic has been lost due to lack of morals, lack of fathering, too many drugs. You see it begin after World War II, when World War II dads come back and they just are too easy on their kids. You see it with all the processed foods that start happening. If you've seen that movie, The Founder, with Roy Kroc, of how uh, he takes the milk out of the milkshakes and puts some powdered stuff in there, so everybody's sick. So you've got a nation of fatherless, sick, drugged up, undisciplined, dumbed down kids that aren't focused on God and faith. They don't know their history. They don't know what human nature is about. And that's where we find ourselves. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because if you look at history, you always see this. If you see um, Sir John Glubb's Fate of Empires, if you read that, he looks at all the world empires, and they all last about 250 to 275 years before selflessness is replaced with selfishness. And you can look at the Roman Empire, which started out as a republic, like we started out as a republic, and I think we've become an empire. I think there's a lot of similarities, in that regard. And we had they had Caesars, they had emperors, but they really had the Praetorian Guard, and the Praetorian Guard picked the emperors, picked the Caesars, and our Praetorian Guard is the FBI and CIA, mostly. So that's the long answer to why we are where we are. The answer is to get back to our core morals, and you only do that by living them, and by being there for your kids. As a martial arts teacher, I've been a foster dad to hundreds of kids who, I just turned 68, got all my birthday cards behind me there, and I got a lot of cards from kids who are not my blood kids, but they're my God kids that have said, "Hey, I'd be dead without you. I'd be suicided without you. I'd be on drugs without you." So we need men to stand up today and be real men and real dads, and we don't have enough of that. We need dads on duty all the time.
Mhm. The older I get, the more and more I appreciate my own father and mother, and I was very lucky, very blessed, because some people don't even have them around, as you described.
You and me both. We
Yeah.
won the lottery.
Yes, definitely, with good parents and being born in America.
Yep. Yep.
Well, you kind of answered my next question. I always ask, because I'm talking to a lot of law enforcement people, what can families do to protect themselves and their kids? But you kind of touched on that already.
Well, I'll touch on it again if you want.
Yeah.
So I have, I've been around for a while now, and I have trained a lot of folks. My martial arts school I've had since 1990. My warrior school since 95. And I've seen a lot of folks, and most of them fall, even if they become senior black belts, even if they become senior shooters. And if you don't have a transcendent value system, a transcendent faith, a faith in God, then I conclude you're not going to make it. There's just too much evil, and I say there's intelligent evil out. That's the source. The source is Satan. That may sound corny, but that's the truth. Up at the top is Satan and powers and principalities, then hyper rich ancient families that think death is an illness, then secret societies. Then you get down into corrupt governments, then you get down into corrupt officials. And this has been going on. If you look at all that stuff, of how long this stuff has been going on, for centuries all over the world, it's beyond human scope. A bunch of guys simply could not pull it off. It's got to be beyond that. So if you realize that, if you realize what kind of war you're in, first you got to know you're in a war. Then you got to know what kind of war you're in. Then you got to choose a side, and then you got to stick with that side. And that's how you do it. It doesn't have to get overly deep. I say, uh, I'm on the side of good. Uh, Good is intentional help. Good is life and freedom, not because I say so, but God says life and freedom are good. Evil is intentional harm. Uh, and you just make choices like that. But most people are relativistic human secularists about everything they're talking about, and they never get real clarity on anything. But I can tell you, as a law enforcement guy, and as a soldier, you got to be clear. The first thing for a warrior, whether he's law enforcement or a soldier, is friend or foe. That's so. The first identifier for me with you is, are you my friend or foe? Okay, and then after that is identification is made, then the relationship follows accordingly. Uh, but most people have no idea of that, and they're just that's why you got divorced single moms taking their little kids to tranny parades and bondage, and those guys dressed up in leather with masks on and saying, "Oh, look at that." Uh, they just have no discernment at all. They're very lost. But the young generation is coming along. The younger generation has had enough of this. They're sick of it. They're not interested. They're turning away from it.
Wow, it's fascinating. I mean, when I was a child, I you're often scared of people just because you're a child. Someone has a beard, or they look strange, or you're unfamiliar. Well, when I was a child, I was afraid of a cousin who had this nice goatee. Just scared me. But someone who purposely looks strange, and to introduce children to that strangeness, I guess it's just grooming, is what it is.
It is totally grooming. It's totally. So I've had lots of homosexual and lesbian students, and that may or may not be part of their nature, but trannies and draggies are simply predators. That's all they are. That's and I won't tolerate any of that in my schools. The same thing with the brightly colored hair to attract kids.
Hmm.
And this whole thing is just part of the larger pedophilia culture that now exists. And that's why I call Biden Pedo Joe, because he was always fondling kids and grabbing kids and biting on kids.
It's on video. It's on video for everyone to see.
Yeah, but how many times did you see it on mainstream news, even Fox or Newsmax?
I don't really watch mainstream news. So.
Well, neither do I. But did they ever show that? Is the question.
Probably not.
Probably not. So then they are complicit.
Hmm.
Like we just saw with Mike Waltz, who just got fired for bringing on the Atlantic editor on his Signal chat, where he was actually on a Israeli app as well the day he got fired. And he was Special Forces, he was a Reserve Special Forces guy.
Hmm. I saw this interview with a lady, because you hear a lot of things, and I don't know what's true and what's not based on what I hear. I was talking to, I saw an interview with a lady who said she was, as a child, a sex slave for rich, powerful, billionaire type people. And she didn't mention Epstein, so it was some other place and some other situation. So there are just pockets of these groups that do this kind of thing, that consume children, drugs.
Yeah, is that a question or a declaration? Or certainly, yes, that certainly takes place.
Yeah.
The adrenochrome stuff is real as well. The frazzle drip stuff is real. There's an old Will Ferrell, the comedian, tape where he's doing a skit with kids in cages, There's well, way back in the day, I saw stuff from inside Epstein's temple, which is now gone. I don't know what happened to that clip. That was a long time ago, of little girls cleaning up this centerpiece altar in there. But the hyper rich live very differently than us, and because we don't really know how they live, we don't think about what they can do. And the hyper rich families who just inherit money, well, when you got all the money and all the what else do you do? Well, you start manipulating countries, and you start manipulating people, and controlling populations. And that's really what it is. It isn't really so much the government alone as ancient hyper rich families that run all this stuff. But yeah, a lot of them are in thrall to Satan. Anderson Cooper, who only at CNN, who only worked, the only place he worked before CNN was CIA. His mother, I can't think of her name, but she was wearing a satanic necklace. She had a little satanic altar over the bed. A lot of these, the Rothschilds, a lot of these folks are very much in thrall to evil, to Satan. But a lot of people are afraid to talk about that. They're afraid to be mocked, or talked about like you're a holy roller. But that's very real. It's evil is very real, just like God is very real, and you got to choose a side. And I think if you don't have there's a great story where there was a Holocaust survivor who was in court at the Nuremberg trials, and he was confronting the torturer, the Nazi torturer, who was sitting across from him in a suit. And there's film of this, and he falls down, and they stop the trial. Oh, we're back. Are you there?
I'm here. Yeah, I see you.
Oh, okay. And they said, "Hey, were you remembering all the terrible things that happened in the camps?" And he goes, "No. When I saw him there, just out of his uniform, sitting in a regular suit, just like me, I realized I could be him, except for my faith." And that was the only difference, and that floored me. So there's a thin line between all this, and you can get sucked into it. It's all over the place all the time, and so that's why I emphasize, my faith, and talk about God, and talk about the Shroud of Turin, and all this stuff, because you can't separate it out. It doesn't work if you separate it out. You got to live it. It's got to be integral to everything you do, and that's part of the big problem today. Is people think they can just put that stuff on a shelf. But the evil is not on a shelf. So you can't keep God's goodness on a shelf either.
Before we wrap up, I got to mention, I read this book, Chase. This was a thrill. You write like a screenwriter.
Well, it was a script. It was originally a script.
Okay.
I had Wes Studi. Wes Studi is from Last of the Mohicans and Heat. Academy Award. He was because I did a movie with him back when I was doing movies, and he got Val Kilmer, and so it was going to be way back in the day. It was going to be Val Kilmer and Wes Studi starring in that. But yeah, there's a lot of me in that book too, though.
I mean, it says fact-based fiction, so I can't imagine everything in there happened, especially that climax.
No. No, I'd love to film that though. If you got $10 million laying around, we'll do it. But
well, maybe one day. Let's see how my current movie does.
Well, so congratulations on getting it done. People don't realize, because I've done a couple of movies, but just like Chase, the deal fell apart. Most movies never get made. So just getting the thing done in the can is a huge accomplishment, because most people can't do it. So congratulations to you. It's fun. It's just so time consuming. I love doing it back in the day, but oh my God, I'm too old to pull those hours now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I wrote this script for this movie with a friend of mine who is now no longer with us. We wrote 3 screenplays together, and this was supposed to be the one that we were going to put our money together and go out and shoot. And then, we lost him. And so I said, I got to go ahead. And so it's not just me making the movie, it's kind of carrying on his vision as well, because no one else is going to do that. So I hope to be done, and I'll keep you posted on it.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, gosh, Jeffrey, I could talk to you for hours. I wanted to mention, this reminds me, one thing that, to the people watching, one interesting thing that Jeffrey does in this book is at the end of every chapter, there's a real news article that relates to something that's happening within the chapter. And I've never seen that before. And I thought that was a great technique.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
And then you mentioned some people that I've actually met, because I once went to a ranch, Double Circle Ranch in Arizona, to pretend I was a cowboy and ride around and herd cattle. And then they told me about the Malpai Borderlands group down in Cochise County. And I went to some of their meetings. There's a bunch of ranchers, so I recognize a couple of the names of people mentioned. So
yeah,
beautiful, beautiful territory.
It is. It is. I used to ride it a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey. I appreciate your time, and I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, let me know how it comes with your when your film comes out. That's great. Thanks for reading my book. You might like the other one a lot too, Initiation. That's real good too. But thanks for the plug. Appreciate it, and maybe we'll make it someday.
Yeah. Well, let's hope this movie becomes a success. All right. Thanks.
All right. God bless.